The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
It's the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Once again, Jason Bryant here with you. On this show, we give you news, reviews, previews, and interviews with notable personalities in wrestling. And our guest today, kind of overdue in terms of his stature in wrestling and why he has not been on this show as yet. Always a pleasure to talk to in person and in the Twitterverse. Now you can read and hear about him at PA Power Wrestling, PA Power Wrestling as part of the College Edition podcast with Tristan Warner, guy I know back from Old Dominion. First of all, Mason Beckman, Beck Diggity, finally, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man, and thanks for trusting me to be part of the Matt Talk Online Network. That's putting a lot of faith in us. It's
more faith in Warner, let's be honest with you right now, because we know who the responsible party is between you two.
Look, you Old Dominion guys, I'm not going to say much, but you're a different breed.
We are, because some of us go to college for 7 years.
Hey, they're called doctors.
Yep, like I haven't heard that a million times. Warner was down there for like a decade, though. I mean, because he wrestled, the 5 years, and then I think two. Actually, he was there probably as long as I was. He was actually paid to be there the last 2 years, as far as his sports information gig. But first things first. What's it like being actually part of the wrestling media now after having been a competitor for so many years?
It's bizarre. It actually hasn't fully set in yet. Because I haven't gotten credentials and everything to cover an event. But I was actually just talking to Jeff Upson a couple days ago about credentials and different logistics for the Penn State Lehigh match coming up in a couple of weeks. And I actually had to ask him, where do I go to check in? I don't know how to do this. So I'm still learning. I'm having a lot of fun with it. And, one of the things I'm actually excited about with this whole opportunity is that a lot of times, as you know, and as we all know, in media, not just specific to wrestling, but a lot of times sports media doesn't necessarily have firsthand experience in the sport, let alone at a high level. I was pretty lucky with the way my career played out. I got to wrestle at the NCAA tournament all 4 years and was surrounded by some really great people, a lot of really great people. And it makes it a little bit easier for me to empathize and understand different perspectives that coaches and athletes have. So it makes it a lot of fun for me, and I feel like I can bring something a little bit different.
I'm going to dive into that a little bit because I'm a guy that had very limited success, very limited career when it comes to high school. I mean, we're talking, 18, 19 months of my life was actually spent on wrestling mat. That's it. I mean, you guys have wrestled 18, 19 months of wrestling in one summer in terms of how many matches you wrestle. But, when we're looking at, usually when you're in sports media, okay, it's the color commentator that has the experience, the Drew Pearson. Actually, Tony Romo's apparently been doing pretty good with the NFL this year. That's where I see the people with experience. Whereas, where do you think that stigma comes from in wrestling that you've got to, like, we see it in coaching too, you've got to have been somebody in terms of ability to be able to, A, be a head coach in college, or B, be able to talk about college wrestling the way it is?
I don't think, especially from a coaching perspective, I think that's overblown. Some of the best head coaches in Division I wrestling right now weren't necessarily guys that had these illustrious careers, right? You look at a guy like Pat Popolizio, who's one of the best in America at building a program, and what he has sustained at North Carolina State. Obviously you have on the other end of the spectrum, you have guys like Kale, you have guys like Tom Brands, like my head coach Pat Santoro. There are absolutely coaches that had illustrious careers, but I think the bigger thing in all of this that gets missed is it's not about the success that someone had in their career. It's about the wrestling mind that individual has. Some of the best conversations I've ever had about wrestling have been with people that, may have never stepped into a starting lineup. You and I have talked in depth about a number of different wrestling topics and scenarios and all sorts of different things. I know Brock Height is somebody else that, he's active in wrestling Twitter and everything. And he's somebody that he wrestled at Bloomsburg in college and everything. But he's not a name that, comes to the forefront of your mind when you think about elite college wrestlers in the last 15 years. And he's got a great wrestling mind. So I think that is more so, and I think it's shifting. I think people are beginning to understand that more and more, that it's about a person's understanding of the sport, not their personal level of success. Because even some teammates I've had understood the sport at such an incredible level and had such a bright mind for it, but they may not have had the physical abilities or the opportunities to have had success. Jeff Buxton is a great example of that. Buxton might be the brightest wrestling mind I've ever been around. The guy is absolutely incredible, and nobody knows a thing about his competitive career. And that's due in part to the fact that it wasn't this big, drawn out, Olympic level thing. But if you can find anyone with a brighter wrestling mind than Jeff Buxton, I would be blown away. So I think that's the bigger issue.
Oh, staying on the Buxton thing just for a minute. I remember when he was at Blair, and Great Bridge had these monster teams coming from Virginia. You had the Stalers, the Frischkorns, Patrick Bond, Chris Brown. I mean, they were monsters. A lot of those guys went on to wrestle Division I. A couple were All-Americans. But when they run into Blair guys, like especially Daniel Frischkorn, who would run into Corey Cooperman, and Cooperman would rarely lose, but there'd be a guy that he might lose to that Daniel might be able to beat. But when they were head to head, Cooperman was not biting on any of Frischkorn's tricks, and it wasn't necessarily his tricks too. It wasn't all like rolls, because the Granby system's not all just about rolls. I mean, it's just ways to set up an inside step or a high crotch, or the way collar ties are setting up things. And Cooperman had an answer for everything, and that was because Buxton had an answer for everything. I mean, student of the game, and you've seen him now more as when he was coaching the senior level, Lehigh Valley Athletic Club. What was it like having him just kind of around the Lehigh program, even though he wasn't like on staff at Lehigh those last couple of years?
It was incredible. It was something that was really fascinating for me, because I wrestled a Blair guy all 4 years in high school at Ironman. So he had coached against me a number of different times. So it was pretty cool for me to go from him always coaching against me at one point in high school to, being on the same side and really getting to experience him as a coach. Like I said, his wrestling mind is absolutely unbelievable, and we always, a lot of people know Pat Santoro for the wrestling mind that he is, he's also amazing. And Coach Pat always talked about what Buxton was like, and having them both in the room, you really started to see how they fed off each other. The thing for Buxton that's, as much as his wrestling mind is second to none, his energy, his enthusiasm, his love of wrestling is such a cool thing. He's like a little kid in the room. To watch Coach Buxton run a practice, he's yelling, he's hobbling around, making jokes, and just makes things fun. Even in the dog days of the season, or when you see the senior level guys that are going through different training cycles, he always makes things exciting. And the insight that he brings, he has a very special talent of making profound statements whittled down to a few words. You know what I mean? He can make these very profound thoughts and statements in a 10-word sentence. And he's one of the few people I've ever been around that's like that. And, getting to know the man behind the coach was a really fascinating thing too, because his life story and his journey was a really incredible thing, and a story that I personally, after learning it, I don't think it's been told enough. People don't understand the trials and tribulations that Jeff Buxton went through, but he was a very special person. He is a very special person to have around the Lehigh program. And obviously having a connection to Blair and be able to get guys like Jordan Cutler and have kids like that in and around the program definitely helps. So it's been a huge advantage for our program in it's probably been 4 or 5 years now. So, I'm definitely thankful that I got to be around him.
Yeah, and just a little factoid for those wondering, Jeff Buxton was an NCAA qualifier in 1980, one time for the University of Rhode Island. That is it. No All-American accolades at Division I level, but the guy has 9 fingers and he wins national championships. That's what happens with Jeff Buxton.
Oh, that's a hilarious story too.
Kurt Backus loves the 9 fingers and wins national titles. So I actually said that to Buxton in Vegas one year. He actually laughed at it, so it's okay that I can tell that part of the story. But in case you're wondering, Jeff Buxton did cut his finger off at Fargo training camp one year with this big giant fan. I think it was actually at Blair. But
yeah, he went to catch it as it fell off the wall.
Yeah, hey, here's a big metal fan from the 50s. Let's just catch that. Yeah, not a good idea. Anyway, next topic I want to dive into just your general infatuation with the sport of wrestling beyond competing, but we got to start with your competition. First time I ever heard the Beckman name, your brother Lawrence, who ended up having a pretty good high school career, wrestled at Hofstra for a little bit, and then you come through, and every time I hear Reynolds, Pennsylvania, for some reason I think of that movie, All the Right Moves, and I just want to equate it to Ampipe or whatever the name of that town was, and I think of my buddy John Schwartz from the Peninsula Wrestling Association, Virginia Duels Wrestling Club. When he moved to Virginia, he's like, yeah, I'm from Reynolds. So it's like, okay, I had those two associations with me. What is it about that area of Western Pennsylvania that wrestling is an infectious blue-collar type of thing?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with that last term there. Blue-collar could not describe, no term could describe the area better than blue-collar. Reynolds High School, it's still to this day, they graduate. Oh man, it's got to be somewhere between 80 and 100 kids. My graduating class was about 95, if I remember correctly. So it's not a super big town. Have you ever seen the movie Friday Night Lights? Or even the show? I guess they're both applicable.
Movie, yes. Show, no.
That's pretty close to how Reynolds is with wrestling. It's a small town. Everybody knows each other. It feels like there's only about 4 or 5 family names that kind of permeate the student body as well as the athletics teams. It's the
is
same
that a
families.
pun on permeate? Is that a pun?
I didn't intend it that way because I'm not smart enough to plan that far ahead, but I'll take credit for it.
Lehigh degree, you're not smart. Yeah, okay, continue. You're gonna joke me about Old Dominion some more. Keep going.
Hey, I was not I did not major in prose. So
and and what he means, folks, PROSE, not PORPRO apostrophe S.
So anyway, yeah, I think
we're going off the rails here early, but keep going.
Yeah, I think culture is the thing, and at one point, I think it was when our program had it was either the 500th or the 600th win in program history, dual meet win in program history. There was a shirt that was made, and the quote on the back said, "From the inside out, it's impossible to explain. From the outside in, it's impossible to understand." And that is the perfect microcosm, because the Reynolds program is such a unique thing, and the level of expectations when you take, especially high school kids, right? But you even see it in college programs. But when you take high school kids and you get them to compete for something bigger than themselves, when they really believe in a cause that's greater than them, and I know that when our guys put on the Reynolds singlet, it means the world to them. They're incredibly proud to wear those 8 letters across their back. Every time when you're in gym class every day, there are these big wooden boards drilled into the gymnasium wall that the name of every state champ, the name, weight, and year is hand painted on these boards on the wall. You walk by the showcases of, I think we've won 12 team state titles, something like that. And have been in the top 3 like 30 times. Now mind you, this is a program that's only hasn't even existed for 60 years. So it's just, you grow up immersed in this, and from this time you put on a pair of wrestling shoes in the Reynolds program, you're expected to do great things. And it's a very real thing. You grow up, a lot of these programs winning a state title, and for some programs qualifying for the state tournament is a really big accomplishment. And it's something, and I don't mean to knock those programs, but it's something that they kind of put on a pedestal. For our program, our kids look at it and they just go, yeah, why wouldn't we? That's just what we do. So when it becomes expectation, and when you get these kids to wrestle for something bigger than themselves and buy into the tradition and everything that's come before them and everything that they're part of, you have some kids that, quite frankly, we've had kids make the state finals. We've had kids win titles, medal at states, et cetera, that shouldn't have. If you really look at a technique standpoint, that were not the best kid in the state, that weren't one of the 8 best kids in the state, but they were just, their mindset and the way that the Reynolds coaching staff throughout the years, it was Neil Lineman built the program, Brian Hills sustained it. He was my head coach. He actually retired the year I graduated. Now it's Casey Taylor. They were, all of those guys have been such incredible motivators, as well as, the technique that they teach and the different assistant coaches we've had over the years. But the biggest thing is that we teach our kids fundamental things. You never watch a Reynolds kid, you're never blown away by the multitude of things that they do, but they're tough kids. They wrestle super hard. They're always in great shape. And again, those kids compete for each other and they compete for the community.
There's some similarities between your hometown and my hometown. Granted, my hometown is a kind of an amalgam of blue collar, third, fourth, fifth generation watermen, fishermen, redneck kinds, and then you've got Langley Air Force Base next door, and it's relatively a mix of affluent and redneck. It was kind of weird. So I can see the part of the program. There's 70 state champs on our wall. We had 9 state team titles. So it's like that small town thing, and it's a wrestling crazed town. If I don't move to Poquoson, Virginia in 1992, I never discover wrestling. So it's like you're pointing out, it's part of the culture. There are 3 youth teams in the city. It's crazy. But when we look at when you get out, and sometimes small town, you want to throw a football reference out there. Let's throw the Varsity Blues reference out there. Whereas, you don't want to be coaching JV football working at Walmart.
Yeah.
That is a reality for some of these cities and these towns that are great sports towns. It's not just wrestling, but what's it like for somebody like you to get out of Reynolds and go to a school that's not, no disrespect to a Bloomsburg or a Lock Haven, the state schools, but to go to a Lehigh across the state, in Bethlehem, it's like, almost like you're almost like the oil in the water. It's like the Reynolds kid's not supposed to go to Lehigh.
Yeah, it was an interesting process. The guys ahead of me, and we've had some wrestlers go to great schools. We had a couple guys go to Columbia, Nick Sommerfeld and Matt Dunn.
We were talking about that before we even got the show started, folks. We're trying to figure out what years and things were going on. I remember watching Matt Dunn beat Lance Palmer at the Iron Man. So that was, that's the other name that jumps out at me. It's you, your brother, and Matt Dunn are the 3 Reynolds kids that I know that at least in recent memory went D1 that, I'm forgetting in recency, but those are the 3 that I think of.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if anybody wants to watch that match, last I checked, is still on YouTube. It's a fun high school match to watch, man. But yeah, we had Dunn, Sommerfeld, and actually Steve Popovich. We had 3 guys go to Columbia, in about a 7 or 8 year span there. So we've had guys go to great schools and everything, but I think one of the things that allowed me and pushed me to a place like Lehigh was from a young age. My brother, our dad, who was one of the coaches at Reynolds and everything, but he always made sure that our perspective and that our scope was really wide. And he did that in a lot of different ways. Looking back on it now, there was a method to the madness as much as we might have hated it at the time. But for work, he traveled all over the world, and he always made sure that, we kind of knew what he was, where he was going, and that things were much bigger than Mercer County, the county in which we grew up in. And that the wrestling, we didn't just stay local to wrestle. We competed all over the place, whether it be through Quest School of Wrestling, the club that we grew up in, or whether it be with Wayne Yon and Wayne Danger.
Oh, Wayne Danger. Pour one out for Wayne Danger.
Yeah,
what a guy.
What a human being he was.
I never knew what his real voice sounded like because he always sounded like this.
That was his real voice. That's the thing.
Oh,
he's shades of Rob Waller.
Little bit, yeah, I get that. I'd never been in Rob Waller's van. I've been in Wayne Danger's van though.
There have been
Super 32. Times. Me, Wayne Danger, and Scott and Josh Moore, and that's all we're gonna say about that. They weren't college coaches then, but
no,
it was a good time.
There was always good times to be had with Wayne. But yeah, no matter what it was, I can remember as an 8th grader going and wrestling on high school teams with Wayne or with Jim Akerley and Quest, and we went everywhere. So it was never something that we just thought was a local thing. We were always Reynolds guys. We were always extremely proud of that. We always had our Reynolds t-shirts on and everything. But we never had any intention, or it was never even a possibility to us to just stay local, when we graduated. as far as going to college and everything like that. I mean, where you end up is where you end up, where you start your life. But the other thing was that as we got older and our careers started to progress, both my brother and I, it became, it started to become a reality, possibility that we could get college taken care of, right? That there were doors that were opening that otherwise wouldn't have been. And as soon as that became a possibility, for each one of us, my brother's 4 years older than I am, our dad had talks with us about, making sure that we understood, hey, this isn't something to be taken lightly. You have opportunities that few people have, and made sure that we understood that and would take full advantage of it. That, wrestling ends. Life is a very long thing. It goes on a long, long time after your competitive career is over. So use wrestling as an avenue into to enable a better life. Not that we struggled growing up, not that we had anything, not that we ever wanted for anything, but it gave both of us a better way into life. So I credit our dad for a ton of it. I credit Jim Akerley for a lot of it. He made sure we always had perspective, and sometimes you don't always want to listen to your parents. As much as my dad was probably right 99% of the time, I'll never say 100 because I know he'll listen to this, and I will never say he was always right. But the mentors that we were surrounded by were a huge part of that. And then my recruiting process started to go on, and Lehigh specifically, actually Wayne Yon, this kind of comes full circle. Wayne Yon, through Wayne, we had known John Hughes for a while, and he was kind of the first person I talked to at Lehigh. And the recruiting process took place, and I just fell in love with it. And that was kind of how Lehigh happened. I wanted to go to a great university. I wanted to go somewhere that had a program like Reynolds does, that just year after year competes at a high level, and things kind of aligned. But as far as getting out of a small town, it's a matter of perspective, and it's a matter of, do you want to be in a big fish in a small pond, or, do you really want to go chase something bigger? And our dad always made sure that we understood there's always something bigger, there's always something that you can chase.
You ended your college career as a two-time All-American, and I want to backtrack a little bit going into your senior year. I had this idea for a show, and we had briefly talked about it. I actually ran it through Steve Lomangino, and then Pat Santori, head coach, we talked about it. So for those who are familiar with Serial and that type of podcast, the series where you tell a story throughout a course of episodes, I had an idea for a show where I was going to follow a senior in college going to, trying to the Trek. I was going to call it the Trek, where it was like, okay, this is their last shot. And the first person that came to mind to do this was you, because one, you're well spoken, you got the background, you're that blue collar kid at a white collar institution, and it seemed like it would work. And Pat Santoro and I talked about it, and he said that you guys had conversations about it. What do you, from Pat told me the why, but I want to know the why on your perspective on why this didn't happen.
Oh man.
Now I'm just going to lead the question here for a little bit. You can sometimes be your own worst enemy when it comes what's between your ears when it comes to wrestling, correct?
Me personally, yeah, absolutely.
So I think what Pat was alluding to is didn't want this to be a distraction, and with everything that was already going on in that senior year, I would have loved to have done it, but in hindsight, we wouldn't have had a really great story to tell, would we?
No, man. There was a lot going on, and I won't dive too deep into detail, but there was an individual that was removed from our program late summer of, what would that have been, 2015. So there was an individual that was removed from the Lehigh program in late of the summer of 2015 because of conflicts and because of lines that have been crossed and different things, and directly affecting me, actually directed toward me. So, and this obviously something wasn't, I would have loved to have done it. And truth be told, even Coach Santoro, any other year, had that situation not taken place, we would have loved to have done it. But with everything I had going on and, that situation, and that's really all I'll say about that situation. And I'm sure anybody that's willing to go back and look at changes that were made in the Lehigh program, they'll figure out who it is. But with everything that I was dealing with in the aftermath of that, I really struggled. And um, anybody that followed my senior year, oh boy, there were some dark days, man. So, truth be told, that's why it didn't come to fruition. I really wanted to do it. It was an idea I was excited about. I thought it went awesome for Lehigh wrestling. I thought it would have just been it was a really fun idea, and I think it would have been a great way to show anybody that hasn't gone through Division I wrestling or even a Division I sport, kind of an inside look, a little peek into what life is like on a day-to-day basis, not just for any Division I athlete, but as someone who was established as really trying to chase a national title, and who there were high expectations for. So in retrospect, it's definitely a good thing we didn't, because it would have been hard to spin things in a positive light for a little while there. But yeah, that's really why that didn't happen. I'm bummed out about it that it didn't. I've actually, that's crossed my mind a few times. But hopefully, I'm sure you'll find somebody, some kid will. Well,
it's got to be the right thing. You can't just pick, okay, that guy's a senior, we'll do him this year. Now, that's the thing. Like, you had the right mix of all these, the backstory that would bring in the non-wrestling fan. That's what I was looking for. Who is going to be browsing on iTunes for something to listen to? And they're going to stumble across this. And I got to give actually Columbia some credit on this, because it was WNYC had a show called The Season where they followed Columbia's horrible football team and into like becoming a winner. And actually, one of the early episodes, they were interviewed. It's like, they're these two guys. They're wrestlers. They don't know much about Columbia's football team other than they're terrible. I mean, it's like, so that was kind of the inspiration for it. But as we move forward, there's a lot of questions that I just believe that statement there kind of answers without even going into true detail about that senior year. From somebody that had success in a sport that's primarily one you have to be selfish, and it's an individual sport, this kind of shows that the team aspect around you does affect your individual performance.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that Coach Santoro always said was you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So environment is an incredibly important thing. And, I was really, really lucky that the coaching staff, Pat Santoro, John Hughes, Brad Dillon, Jeff Buxton by extension, through the LVWC, all of my teammates, specifically my best friends, the guys that I came in with, Nathaniel Brown, Will Sullivan, Mike Stepien, Dave Quackenboss, John Bolick, those guys that were there with me from day one when everything was going on that senior year, they were incredible. And not just them, the entire team, but guys I was super, super close with, the Cruz brothers, Mitchell Minotti, Lake Gardner. I owe all of them a lot, because there was a point in time there, to be honest with you, that I considered walking away from the sport and from Lehigh. That's how, beat up I was about everything that went on. So, and that is I want to make it very clear that is to absolutely zero fault of anybody associated with Lehigh University or Lehigh Wrestling. They all did. As soon as they knew of anything that was going on, it was handled, literally in 24 hours. So that is, I can never speak anything but the highest praises of those people. But you're absolutely right. The people you're with, from a training perspective, from a coaching perspective, and a college athletics team, they're your best friends. They should be. They're the people you spend, there's roughly 40 guys on a Division I wrestling roster. You're going to spend a ton of time with each other, right? So you better like each other, and you better fit in, right? And it was a huge thing having guys like Darian and Randy Cruz, who were always smiling, always laughing. Nate Brown, who enjoyed nothing more than, because I am not a morning person, and Nate is a huge morning person. Nate enjoyed nothing more than bugging me in the morning and knowing I hated it.
No,
But,
I was like, say, morning person. What does that mean for a college athlete nowadays? Because even when I lived with college athletes, I was not a morning person. But what's Nate Brown's morning person like? What time's he getting up here?
Well, first of all, Nate admittedly was an old man. He was like a 65-year-old man, like a 65, 75-year-old man at 19. He will wake up at 6 in the morning, 5:36 in the morning, drink his cup of coffee. I don't know if he reads the newspaper. If he doesn't read the newspaper, he's watching the news. And he sits there in his sweatshirt and his slippers and everything. Um, he got a dog our first year off campus at Lehigh. So his dog Judge Brown, and he sits there and does that whole thing. He was never out past 10 p.m.
Is the dog's middle name Joe?
No, it's not.
I was going to say if his dog's name was Judge Joe Brown, we'd have some words.
But no, Judge Brown was the unofficial mascot of Lehigh Wrestling, one of the coolest dogs on planet Earth. But yeah, he's been an old soul forever. And for some stupid reason, that equated to him being wired and having all kinds of energy. Our freshman year, we would have to go. Anybody that's ever been on Lehigh campus, there's the academic side of campus on the mountain side, and then you got to go up over the mountain to the athletics campus. Now, normally we don't have to do that because our facility is on the academics campus. But when we do our interval training phase over at the indoor track, we got to go over the mountain for that. So Nate and I, we lived in the same dorm freshman year, and we had our same class schedule. I think it was the spring semester of that year. So we would have to wake up at like 5:45 in the morning and go over. And there's me. I would be perfectly happy going over there, doing the workout, leaving, coming back without ever saying a word, which is shocking for me because I talk like crazy. and I hated mornings that much. And Nate, every morning, he'd have this big grin on his face. He'd be, "Hi, Mason, how you doing this morning?" We would get into his car, and he would always play the same song. It was 6 Foot 7 Foot by Lil Wayne every time. So I hate that song. I hated mornings, and I hated mornings with Nate Brown.
I actually don't know that song, believe it or not, because I actually listened to like nothing past 2003. But other than "How you kids get off my lawn." Now, speaking of kids getting off my lawn, if we're recording this around 10 o'clock Central Time, it's actually obviously later out east, but we're being interrupted via Twitter here. So yeah. I'm going to give you the honor here. Blow up the spot. Who is interrupting the interview here via Twitter?
So it started out as, right as you called me, Melissa Simmons, who, for those who don't know, is the North Carolina State Wrestling Director of Operations. Melissa FaceTimed me right as our Skype call started, so I couldn't answer, and she then tweeted about me, quote unquote, diligently ignoring her FaceTime. So then Ryan Holmes came to my defense, as any true friend would do, and he said, "Nah, he was on the phone with me." Right after I had already responded that you and I were doing short time. A conversation ensued that includes Melissa telling Holmes to go back to Easton, you saying that I have time for short time, which was well done. Melissa asking, is Kyle her brother?
Yes.
Okay. Asking her brother for backup, which he has not provided.
Kyle will not provide backup. I got a story about that here in a second. Continue.
And Melissa accusing you of making a short joke because
You're short.
I'm not very tall.
You're a college. So, you wrestled 133 in college. I think they top out outside of Nick Simmons at like 5'4".
AJ Shop.
Okay, yeah, guy you know very well. How many times you wrestle AJ?
Oh God, had to be close to 10 before it was all said and done.
Twice at the All-Star Classic too.
Twice at the All-Star Duel. Okay, so twice in high school, once at universities, twice in the All-Star Duel, once in a regular dual meet at Crapple at the Garden, once at Midlands. So 7?
Oof.
7 that I can count, and they were all miserable.
Why was he miserable to wrestle?
He was just so hard to wrestle, and I'm sure a lot of people say the same thing about me because I know for a fact that I was a pain. But AJ, he could physically do things that other kids couldn't, and anytime you wrestle a guy like that, it's miserable, to be honest. When you wrestle a super explosive guy like a Nashawn Garrett, they're hard to game plan for. They're hard to they're not hard to game plan for. It's just hard to physically pull off the game plan. And AJ had hands the size of freaking dinner plates, that were like vice grips. And the way he wrestled on top was so unique, and he was so good at it that you had to be really careful. Otherwise, you could get pinned at any given point. He was actually a lot better on his feet than people remember, or even people gave him credit for at the time. If you got to his leg, he was super scrambly, had all sorts of crafty, funky ways of putting you on your back after you were in on his leg. They were fun matches, and anytime you get to wrestle somebody that good, it's fun. But we wrestled each other a lot, and we had spent so much time around one another, both growing up in Western Pennsylvania, that we knew one another so well that it got boring by the end of it all.
Not exactly thrilling matches for fans to watch.
No, God, no. Not that I was ever a thriller, but
I mean, no disrespect to anybody out there. I'm gonna kind of like lean Nick Marable. The 3-2 one takedown riding time point. I love Nick, but man, those were him and Mac Lunas. Man, you want to talk about snooze fests? Oh
man, I forgot about Mac Lunas. You're right. He was
so crazy high scoring until he wrestled Nick Marable, and it was like.
He was so good.
I need to get to their steakhouse.
Man, I've heard it's incredible.
Maybe not after that comment, but
you'll have a Super Troopers moment. Does this look like spit to you?
We have liter cola. I don't want a large farva.
I don't want a large farva.
Wait, April 20th. You waiting for the sequel?
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
It probably won't be, but as long as there's some of that stupid humor, that's all I care about. Because that's all.
We got another side. I got another tangent. I still got to go back to the Kyle Simmons story, and then we got to get back to the shop thing. So I'm in Denmark in 2009, and I those of you who know Super Troopers know the end of the scene where they're all hammered, and you see that he just kissed that guy. So we're at the World Championships. And I'm there working in Gary Abbott's place. I didn't even work for USA Wrestling yet, but I was there as a freelancer with Craig Sesker. And he had not seen the movie. And we're sitting right behind the FILA Bureau, like the people, that the directors and the Bureau members and the people that are drinking wine during a wrestling tournament, the old FILA smuggery. And they're all European and kiss each other. It's like, I was like, you see that? He just kissed that guy. And those jokes just fell flat. Like, it's like, Super Troopers, no. So every time I'd see him, he just kissed that guy. Damn it, he's not going to get the reference. Nobody got the reference. So I'm at least glad you brought up a Super Troopers reference, meow.
Did you know, so the end of that scene, when he looks over the car and the other cop holds up 9, he's actually already said it 10 times.
I did not know that.
Yeah, fun fact of the day.
Yeah, Jim Gaffigan. That was probably his best movie scene ever. But now... next question I want to talk about. Let's go back to Kyle Simmons real quick, because Melissa's going to love this, because she's going to listen. But People dog me about my weather tweets, and what's up with you and the weather? Like,
how did that start?
Believe it or not, it's podcast nerd stuff. So I listen to a podcast show called Ask the Podcast Coach, typically every Saturday morning when I'm cooking breakfast, and I let the wife sleep in. No, she gets to sleep in on Sundays, but we're getting the day going, and I listen to the show, and a guy named Jim Collison does a tech show out of Omaha, and he has this if this then that thing where he tweets the weather, and I'm like, well, I wanted to be a meteorologist when I was a kid. I like the weather. I mean, I do like the weather, legitimately. I used to watch the Weather Channel. I mean, now I watch the Weather Channel and look and think back in the days, like, man, Janetta Jones was awesome, but. The weather, it's like, I just like the weather. So I was like, all right, well, I'll tweet I found this little script that runs it automatically. I was like, I'll put a short time tag on the end of it. It's like, hey, here's the weather. Subscribe to the website. It's like a not like a lead magnet by any means, but it's like, it gets people talking, because now it's like a joke. JB, what's the weather like in New Brighton? I was like, that's just how it starts, because it's like, it's a link that says, hey, here's the subscribe link. So it just 9:15 every morning, you're getting the weather in wonderful New Brighton, Minnesota, 55112. So speaking of that, two people have done this. One, Andrew Burgoyne, is a Penn State fan, and he is a patron of this program via our Patreon at mattalkonline.com/join the team. And then so Kyle one day is on business, and he followed me on Twitter. hey, I'm in business. I'm doing on a business trip in Vadnais Heights. I've seen that that's kind of near you. I'm like, yeah, it's like 10 minutes away. So I knew it was Melissa's brother. Then next thing you know, he throws her under the bus on a few things. I got a couple beers, and I now have basically some privileged information that now Melissa Simmons has to be nice to me the rest of her life. So it was all because of a weather tweet. That's as simple as how it goes.
Man, what a wild world we live in. Weather tweets leading to valuable information
About
on,
directors of operations at Division I programs, yeah.
Yeah, and especially anybody that knows Melissa, information like that would be incredibly valuable because she takes no prisoners.
She knows her stuff too, so can't wait to get. She's going to be on the Pack Mentality pop-ins here soon. I know that's going to happen because that's another show on the network. Now, circling back to Mason Beckman stories, and let's talk about Lehigh for a minute because I've been getting Denny Deal's Lehigh University Wrestling newsletter for probably a decade, and it's one thing that Lehigh Wrestling has, and it's not Denny, not just Denny, but it has almost a Notre Dame football type of feel in terms of how the fans feel like the team should be performing, and that goes back to even before Greg Strobel. And what everybody feels like they're connected to the program, and everybody feels like they have a say. I mean, what's it like to know that you've got such a fan base that's so engaged? Granted, they're getting older, but they're still engaged in how matches should be coached in some respects.
Well, I got to see it in one perspective, but Pat Santoro, one of the jokes we had was, St. Patrick's Day is named after him because he truly has the patience of a saint. Some of the emails, phone calls, and just random appearances that people make up in his office in the Caruso complex, it blows my mind how well he deals with it. I mean, look, I love our fans. They are absolutely incredible. I can never thank them enough. Grace Hall, the few times we got to wrestle in Stabler, the place was always rocking. It was a ton of fun, and I'm really thankful for my time there. And, every year we had a pretty good size section of fans at NCAAs. You always knew who they were because they had brown shirts and white hair.
That was the joke. The joke is, and again, not disparaging Lehigh fans here, I remember reading a newspaper article about Penn State football fans, and it led to the question of who's older, Lehigh wrestling fans or Penn State football fans. It's a push.
It kind of is. Now, I will say this. We're getting a whole new rejuvenation of people back into the Lehigh fan base. A lot of the guys from the Strobel era, like Derek Zink was always around. John Trench is actually coaching the Lehigh Valley Wrestling Club, the youth program. So those guys are back around. Obviously, Brad Dillon's coaching. So a lot of those guys are coming back around. Those of us who just recently graduated, we get back as much as we can. So we're injecting some youth into it. But it was a really special thing to be part of a program that has, top 10 all-time tradition in college wrestling. When you really think about that, it's a pretty incredible thing. As far as the fans feeling like they have a say, in some ways it gets overblown, right? It's always the minority that makes the most noise.
The vocal minority, yes, sir. As a message board moderator for years, I know what that means.
Oh, man, there is definitely a vocal minority. Like the article that came out after the end of last season and about Coach Santoro and these different things. There's a vocal minority, but there's always going to be. I think at Lehigh, just because of the way the tradition is, the coaching staff and the athletes are more accessible, for better or worse. And look, I got to know a lot of incredible people that are alum that are just huge Lehigh wrestling fans. Perfect example, Linda Robbins is, I don't know if she still is, but for a long time she was the treasurer of the LVAC, which is now the LVWC. Linda got into Lehigh wrestling because her husband Stan, who was, has since passed away, her husband Stan was a huge, I believe was a Lehigh alum, was an enormous Lehigh wrestling fan. So she got, she didn't even really know about wrestling before she met her husband, all those years ago. Her husband passes away. She never misses a match, home or away, man. I walk into the gym for the Oregon State duel my redshirt sophomore year, and there's like what 15 Lehigh fans there. It's the whole way across America, and it's on a Thursday.
On a Thursday in Corvallis, not too many people from the Lehigh Valley make that trip.
Thursday in Corvallis. Although I will say, another shout out to my dad. He never missed a single match of mine in college, home or away. Dude's out of his mind. He showed up that day in Corvallis wearing a Rick Tuckett Penguins jersey. Never forget it.
Rick Tuckett. That's a reference I don't think I would ever think I would hear on any of my shows ever. Wow. Continue.
Yep. But yeah, Linda was awesome. She never missed a match. I mean, she treated us like we were her kids. She loved us, would have us over. She'd hold picnics at her house. She'd buy the food and go, all right, you guys just cook it. I just want to make sure you guys are all taken care of and everything. And it was awesome. So getting to meet people like that just loved Lehigh wrestling. Lehigh wrestling has this infectious thing about it, in a good way, not a bad way. This is infectious thing about it that, once you're drawn into the family of Lehigh wrestling, it truly becomes a family, and people gravitate back towards it, and they have this. People are compelled to give back, whether it's financially or with time or what have you. It's a pretty cool thing that so many of our fans and our alum, while there is the vocal minority that does say this, that, and the other thing at dual meets and to coaching staff and to the athletes, that's going to happen anywhere. But some of our fans are awesome. We had some hilarious conversations in some bizarre locations with fans over the years.
One thing that just we look at the legacy, and actually real quick, the only All-American, the only college All-American from my hometown was the only Division I All-American from Lehigh. Go figure.
Yes.
John Morris, heavyweight, 1992, Poquoson, VA.
Saw that picture on the wall. I think I sent that to you or tweeted it to you at one point.
Well, because actually this summer I was in town at my hometown for my 20-year reunion. Morris was in town for his 30-year reunion, and we were met at Mike McCormick's house, who's the NCAA wrestling official, who also is from Poquoson. He was actually a 3-time high school state champ. So now, as we talk about the Lehigh things, and then there's the connection to my hometown, and my buddy Mike Newbern wrestled at Lehigh, and he's one that really taught me about the program, is the 27-8 thumping of Michigan. Let's get into current events.
Yes.
Lehigh ranked number 5, the first time in the top 5 since 2005, and those were some monster teams. What's the deal with this team? There's some guys on this team you look at and be like, who is Jake Jacobson? Who is Ian Brown? I mean, Luke Cameron, Cortland Schuyler are in the lineup, and yeah, Chris Weiler wasn't in the lineup, and they thumped Michigan. What's the deal here?
It's been a process. It's been a 10-year thing that Coach Santoro and those guys have really put together, building Lehigh wrestling back to what it was and what it should be. I think Coach Strobel's last year there, they were like in the 40s at NCAAs. They just fell on hard times, and the new staff, it changed the culture, it changed everything. It's a family thing. It's a family feel now. The team's extremely close, and those guys just get after it. One of the proudest things from my time at Lehigh is, being part of the culture change and being part of what that program has become now. But there's the hammers. Everybody knows Darian Cruz, as they should. Defending national champ, 2-time All-American, around a 12er his sophomore year. Even though some people, for some strange reason, defending national champ and give him no chance to repeat. But that's neither here nor there. That's just idiotic. But, Scotty Parker, who was an All-American last year, and then this season is just lighting the world on fire so far. Has, I think, 4 ranked wins already. That match, he beats Cade Brock. But, the match with Brock, and I realized the way that match played out was kind of funky. But last year, it was a tie match in the scuffle finals with a minute to go when Scotty busts his ankle or his knee. For somebody somewhere along the way put a chip in people's heads. that they are reluctant to believe in Lehigh guys. That is the feel that I have. That is the feel that our kind of program had for a while. And Scotty is a great example of it. He's the number 3 guy in the country, and you still have people kind of going, Darian's a defending national champion. People still question it. It's absurd, but it is what it is. Luke Karam, you mentioned, won 3 state titles at Becca High. He's a Bethlehem kid, steps into the lineup, and he's just ready to compete as a redshirt freshman. Court Schuyler is actually a kid. I think Court's a senior now.
Yeah, Roster says he's a junior, according to this. Pete Schuyler's kid, who Pete wrestled at Lehigh, was the head coach at Franklin and Marshall for a bit. And I actually used to announce F&M dual meets during Pete's era there. But, Manheim Township kid.
Yeah, I will say this. I think F&M's probably got the coolest name for their student section, the Dipsticks, because they're the diplomats. So
I think it was the dip zone when I was there. They've obviously changed it. Oh, interesting fact too about F&M. Their gym named after a member of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. So
interesting.
You've got the building there, Lehman Turner Arena. Then you got Gallagher Iba Arena, and then Mazer Gym, named after wrestling people. Charlie Mazer. Little factoid. I just dropped a knowledge bomb on you.
Yeah.
All right, continue. I've interrupted you way too many times. This is like we're sitting at a bar.
You're good.
That is scary. When me and Mason run into each other at nationals, it's just like there's the discussion outside of that 1 year you had your forehead was just destroyed.
It wasn't just my forehead. I had a huge cut across my face too.
Oh.
But well, there's 2 messages there. Number 1, whatever it takes. Number 2, don't be an idiot and lose in the first round, which I did 3 times. Anyway, Court Schuyler, fun fact.
Yeah, great transition to bring that one back. You're going to be good at this podcast thing.
So you mentioned Court Schuyler's dad, Pete, who was a multiple-time All-American for Lehigh. I think was multiple-time. I know he was an All-American. He wrestled the younger Amin brother, Malik, whose father was a Michigan alum. So that was kind of cool in that dual meet against Michigan that you had 2 kind of legacy guys wrestling in that dual meet. So that was interesting. But Court's a kid he's always kind of been in and out of the lineup. He had a win over Jimmy Gillibon at one point. He pinned Tyler Smith my senior year in the Bucknell duel. He's always been good. He's just never been able to be in the lineup at the end of the year. So now, and even this year, he's going back and forth with John Mealy. So he's been one of those guys that's kind of been a victim of the depth of the Lehigh program. 57, Ian Brown, he's a top 20 guy. And he placed 3rd at the Scuffle at one point. I don't remember if that was last season or 2 years ago. So he's got some great wins. He, obviously added the Pantaleo one to that. He was undefeated and won a state title his senior year of high school in Pennsylvania. AA guy, small school guy. So
he's kind of a point of contention though for you Keystoners too. I was like, he was what, 2nd to state? AA. I think my roommate in college said that one time. It was about one of the guys that was on the team. He's from Schuylkill Valley or something. It's like, hey, what did Krebs play? It was AA. Oh, dude, you're at Redland, okay? What am I? Oh man, my Pennsylvania roommate. So again, Ian Brown, continue. Hanover.
Yeah, so he was a Hanover kid. 65 bounces back and forth between Cole Walter, Drew Longo, and Gordon Wolf, which, by the way, is there any kid in Division I wrestling that is just more insane match to match to watch than Gordon Wolf?
He's definitely a walking heart attack. If you're coaching, I would have to believe. So speaking of walking heart attacks, that would have been the match with Alex Meyer at Nationals that year. You want to talk about just 2 walking heart attacks running into each other? I mean, there were defibrillators in the Lehigh and Iowa sections.
Yeah, that match. I still to this day I've never seen that match, but I heard it was absolutely absurd. So you've got those 3 guys, and Gordon. Remind me to tell you sometime the story. The first time he ever. That any of us ever met him when he committed in high school. He gets back. There's a big, long story to the whole weekend, but the short version is and Gordon's a different cat. I love him. one of the funniest kids I've ever met. But man, he marches to the beat of his own drum. And there's always, club practice on Sunday. So he finishes up his visit and he's like, all right, I'm going to club practice. And before he leaves, he goes, do you think Zach Gray will be there? I went, well, probably, because he's got to work out too. He goes, oh, okay. And he swings back by the house that a few of us were hanging out at to say thank you for, having him for the weekend and everything. And they're like, hey man, how was practice? He goes, it was good. Zach Gray was there, but I didn't wrestle him.
I gotta get. This is obviously a more off the record, full over a beer discussion.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, the 2 days prior to this were just hysterical. But if you ever watch an interview with him, if any of them even exist out there,
screw that. We're gonna get him on the show. That's what's gonna happen. We're gonna figure this out. We're gonna figure this out.
You'll have a good time with Gordon. So, but yeah, they've kind of got that triumvirate at 65. It's and Longo's the guy that's placed at the Scuffle, and Gordon was a national qualifier. So, 3 great answers at 65. 74 is Cutler, who speaks for himself. I think a lot of us have been raving about Cutler and how good he is, which it doesn't feel like we should have to. He won the Scuffle last year. I understand he didn't make weight at EIWAs, that whole situation. First of all, he is a monster 174. The fact that he made 157 last year still baffles me.
Well, let's hold up there for a second, because you also had issues your first year in the lineup with weight causing you to move from 25 to 33. So, what is the situation? I mean, how hard is it that first year really seeing college time to make a weight that you've kind of grown out of?
It's not fun. Part of it was I was still really learning how to cut weight and how to really cut weight, but I was still growing. And look, I was so sucked out at 25 that I never talked. That's all me. That should say a lot.
Yeah. If Mason Beckman's not talking, whether it be on Twitter to somebody else, to somebody next to him in class, something ain't right.
No, it was a struggle. And it sucks, man, to, put it pretty basically. And I think it's really unnecessary in a lot of situations that kids, a big part of it is kids get an image of themselves in their head and they say, I'm a 125 or I'm a 157 or, whatever it is. And they see themselves as being physically smaller than they are. You know what I mean? Because you're still growing and for me, it was pretty easy for me in a heartbeat to weigh 42 or 43 when I was still making 25. And, and that wasn't even a situation where I'd have to, go crazy to get that heavy. It would just kind of happen in a couple of days of just being normal.
Yeah, you're not going home binging on Permanis and icy lights.
No. Hey, don't be knocking icy light. Kurt Angle did some.
Dude, okay. One of my best friends in this world didn't wrestle. Well, he wrestled, I think, in 7th grade, but one of my best friends, one is a Mount Lebanon grad, and 2 took me to my first professional hockey game.
You got a Lebo grad.
At the Igloo, Pens versus Devils. Got the $20 student seat, so if you stood up, the overhang was in your way, and got a Permanis pastrami and a tall icy light. He would bring it back down from, where was he at? That area next to Dormat.
Dormont.
Yeah, but they called it Doormat.
Oh, well, that is true.
It's the next neighborhood over in the Mount Lebanon district. So, yeah, we were drinking icy light and lager before it was cool in Virginia. So, I'm not dogging the icy light. I just haven't had one in a while.
That is a Pittsburgh staple, dude. I live 20 minutes south of Pittsburgh, and I haven't had one in a while. When you can afford above icy light, you normally don't drink it. But anyway,
we're still continuing on the Lehigh lineup here. So short time is not so short tonight.
Long story short, when you're kind of a tweener, if you have the opportunity to build into the weight above you, it's definitely better. It's better for the development. And especially when you're young and you get into a college lineup, part of it is you're kind of afraid to go to your staff and say, like, hey, I kind of want to move up. You know what I mean? You don't want to make the wrong impression and that sort of thing. So it's it's a sticky situation, especially depending on how the lineup, how the lineup is kind of set up. I was fortunate in that I was able to move up, and remain in the lineup and everything. So, um, but yeah, Cutler up to weights is as big of a 174 as anybody in America, and the kid's just really, really, really good. We have a lot of those in the Lehigh lineup, and then you move up, and then you go up to the next weight. Price, Cutler and Price are both ranked fourth or fifth in the country right now. Price moved up from 74 last year, and he's another guy that's somehow quietly the number 5 guy in the country. Last year was around a 12er last year. Both of those guys are just absolute studs. So, they're anybody you put on the mat against either one of them, I really wholeheartedly believe that the Lehigh staff sends those guys out expecting them to win. 97, Jake Jacobson, the kid with 2 first names. He was a state champ in high school for Stroudsburg. I think it was Stroudsburg first ever state champ, now that I think about it. But he's a kid that the coaching staff was super, super high on coming in. So was Chris Weiler, actually. So those two, I think, are both up at 97 now, with Price moving up to 84. So they're both at 97. They're both guys that the staff is super high on and have a ton of talent. They're both kind of raw coming in. Weiler's that funky, rolly, wild style, somewhat close to Gordon Wolf. Jacobson is a little bit more traditional. He's really good on top, especially for a freshman. So whoever's in the lineup, those two are both going to do a really good job. And then heavyweight, Jordan Wood, who's a guy that I know, you with USA Wrestling, you've seen a lot of Jordan. Awesome kid. I mean, honestly, a special talent. Anybody in the heavyweight realm that's not named Gable Stevenson kind of gets lost in the conversation right now. And you understand that when you have a guy like Gable, but Jordan's an incredible talent, and he's an even better kid. He's just a ton of fun to talk to, a ton of fun to be around, plays multiple instruments and stuff. So he's an awesome kid. And but top to bottom, that Lehigh lineup, there aren't any holes. They could very easily put numerous guys on the podium. You've got Darian, who won a national title, so you've got at least off the bat one title contender. As well as, like I said, Scotty's ranked 3rd, Cutler's ranked 4th, Price is 4th or 5th. So you've got high-level guys across the lineup, and they're just quietly going about their business, which I know is the way that they would all prefer to do it. Let everybody else take the attention, and they'll keep plugging along.
Now, as we talk about what Mason Beckman is doing these days, you said you had to, get done with work. You got to do some practice. So what are you doing with that Lehigh degree, and what are you doing as far as the whole real world and adulting goes?
So I've got a regular 9-to-5 white-collar job down here south of Pittsburgh. I work in supply chain management, so that's my day job. And then I coach alongside of Jim Akerley at the Quest School of Wrestling. So I'm still involved, in the sport of wrestling on the coaching side of things, which is so much more stressful than competing. Oh my Lord. It's a ton of fun, and it's more fun. It's so much more fun than I could have ever imagined. Helping kids chase their dreams, and I know that's such a cliche, but it's the truth. Helping kids chase their goals and things. Our club just had a couple kids sign their NLIs last week, which was super exciting to see them, be excited about the opportunities they're getting. Logan Macri going to Chattanooga, Kyle Homick going to Gardner-Webb.
Wait, let's stop right there. You got kids going to non-traditional programs in the Southern Conference.
Yep.
What is that? What do you attribute that to?
The right fit for both of those guys. So as much as I love the Lehigh program, I would never push it on anyone. Obviously I would be thrilled if, whoever wants to go to the Lehigh program, right? Let alone one of the guys that I'm fortunate enough to coach. But it's all about fit. And I will support a kid going to a program, to any program that I know and I trust is run by good people. And both of those programs are great examples of that. I don't know the Gardner Webb staff super well. I've gotten to know the Chattanooga staff pretty well. Dave Hoffman, Coach Esslinger, Nick Brissetta. I've known Nick Brissetta for a long time, and they're great dudes, and they're hustling down there, and they're really trying to make something of UTC wrestling. So watching both of those guys go through their recruiting processes, by no means was I one of the main people that they talked to, but just anytime they had questions of someone who somewhat recently went through the recruiting process, to be able to help those guys was awesome, and to see how excited they both are and how much they both think that they fit in their respective programs of choice. It's exciting, man. And I think they're both going to do great things. They're both good schools. And again, more than anything, both the program and the university, as well as the town in which it's located, perfect fits for each kid.
Last topic, as we've talked about we're not here to talk about the white collar job. We're to talk about the 2019 NCAA Wrestling Championships coming to the Berg.
Yes, I am so excited. I'm kind of salty that it's now happening. Well, I have mixed feelings because it would have been so much fun to wrestle in PPG Paints Arena, in front of, I grew up about an hour north of Pittsburgh, so it would have been awesome to wrestle in front of a hometown crowd and everything. But in some ways, I think I'm going to enjoy it more now that I'm out because, it's the city that I live very close to, that a ton of my friends are here. After it was announced, I can't tell you the number of texts and phone calls I got. But hey, man, what are the chances if you're still living there? Like, we're just gonna crash with you. I'm like, all right, man. If there's room on the floor, you can crash here. I've only got one shower. I've got two bath. I've got a bath and a half. So Godspeed, guys.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting the same thing for 2020 because it'll be out here the following year. Now, when wrestling fans are going to come to Pittsburgh, we got Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Minneapolis, the next three very different cities. Two of those cities hate each other. And then, Minnesota's just like, oh, hey, what's going on with the whole Minnesota nice thing. But Pittsburgh and Cleveland, the struggle is real between those two sports towns.
In what manner of speaking?
Well, the Browns hate the Steelers and vice versa.
Oh, okay.
I would say that the Penguins, they've got nothing to laugh at because Cleveland doesn't have a hockey team.
Nope.
And then, but Pittsburgh doesn't have an NBA team, so we're left with the Indians and the Pirates.
Yeah, that's interesting. Each city's right now, each city's best team doesn't have a rival in the other city. That's interesting. But the Steelers and the Browns, it's big brother, little brother. So for Steeler fans, there are other things to be concerned with.
Yeah.
For Browns fans,
call us when you make the playoffs.
They are just constantly salty. I'll be honest, I feel bad for Browns fans because they are awesome fans. They are so absurdly loyal to a franchise that just continuously rips their heart and soul out.
Yeah.
If you ever get a chance, YouTube a video called Factory of Sadness.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen this. My buddy has a shirt. He's a Bengals fan, and he wears it just because of the Browns. Yeah, that's quality stuff. So,
yeah. So, but they're both awesome sports towns. They're both great places. Pittsburgh obviously is the better of the two in every possible measurable way, and some that aren't measurable. But from wrestling towns, could you find two better hotbeds? And my answer is no.
Yeah, Northeast Ohio versus the Whitfield, and then you wrestled in college in Lehigh Valley. So you've got a pretty good perspective there. Now, this is the moment you've been waiting for. It's time for Short Time on Short Time. 10 questions. Oh. We're not doing the clock thing anymore because that just doesn't freaking work. You just ready to roll? You ready to roll?
Always ready.
All right, question number 1. Favorite person to follow on Twitter?
Ryan Price.
Price is right. Question 2, you win the Olympic gold. What were you having for dinner?
Permanis.
Yeah, we'll think a side note. Which sandwich?
Capicola and egg.
Oh, that's my number 2. I'm a pastrami straight through typically.
Oh, that's a good one.
Question 3, who's the best wrestler people don't talk about?
In the NCAA?
Anytime. One guy or girl that doesn't get their respect.
Oh man, that is such a loaded question. I mean, we just talked about the Lehigh guys, so I'm gonna go any one of Parker Price or Cutler, which sounds like a law firm / financial institution.
And with Lehigh degrees, they may just do that. Question 4, all-time favorite flavor of Gatorade?
Cool Blue.
Favorite video game of all time?
Probably Zelda Ocarina of Time. I actually have my Nintendo 64 sitting about 4 feet away from me right.
Oh my God. How many times I watched my roommates play that game for hours on end? Let's see. I've got so many different questions that are floating around. I don't know. Who's one guy from history you'd like to wrestle, regardless of weight class?
One guy from history I would like to wrestle. Oh boy. For Abe Lincoln's the first person that came to mind because he's a president that wrestled.
That's the most common answer of anybody out here. So, let's see. Worst flavor of Gatorade?
Worst flavor of Gatorade? I don't know if they still do G2, like the kind of watered down version.
Low calorie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The orange version of G2 is god awful.
Okay.
God awful.
That's good. All right, best recipe you make from scratch. I'm borrowing this one from Kevin Black because he likes to cook. He was on the last show.
Ice cream. I've got a homemade, one of the cylinders and the mixers. I've got one of those sitting in my garage that is actually older than I am. My dad had it for a long time and he gave it to me. Homemade ice cream. Ask any of my college teammates. Stuff is the bomb. It's a Ron Beckman special. That's my dad.
All right, so going Greco, I'm going to mix this up because I remember asking Chael Sonnen the same questions. In their prime, without payoffs, Karelin or Mian Lopez? Who wins?
Karelin.
All right, and question 10, your most memorable victory?
Man, that's a hard one.
Does it involve somebody pulling on a wrestling mat? Because that's the most photographed victory, so that could be the most memorable.
Yeah, that's one of them for a totally different reason. The two that I would say, that's probably number one, but it's kind of a 1A, 1B. So that was the first time I won states as a junior in high school. But the backstory to that is you mentioned my older brother. He medaled all 4 years in high school, was a top 20 kid in the country for a lot of that time. And he actually never made a state final. So, Lawrence was always close and never quite got it done. So, after his 4 years, and then I come in the next year and I lose in a ride out in the finals as a freshman. So then it starts to work in my head even more like, man alive, this might never happen for us, as a family. And our dad's one of our high school coaches, so he's in the corner for all this. Then my sophomore year, I'm winning the whole match in the quarterfinals. I take a shot with 30 seconds left to try to stall. And Zach bites, does that shin wizard tilt. I give up, takedown and backs, and I lose 5-4. So after that was really when it was like, man, like this really may never happen. I don't know what's going on, but like we're cursed in this building. So winning that first state title, it wasn't so much a personal thing as it was a family breakthrough. That was a really big thing for us as a family. And then the other one that comes to mind is the first time I All-Americaned. Again, for a lot of reasons. I beat Mark Gray, who I wrestled 1,000 freaking times throughout our lives, who was someone that, was, I guess you would say, a rival of mine, if you're into that sort of thing. Somebody that my entire career, people on message boards and whatever else, you hear things. People always said that Mark was better than I, and that's nothing personal against Mark. It's not like he had a say in that, but I was always told, people always like to say that, oh, Mark will beat him next time and this, that, and the other thing. And, and for us, Cornell's our big rival. Anytime you can beat a Cornell guy, that's a good day for a Lehigh guy. And I mean, I came out of high school as a top 10 recruit in my graduating class in the country, and I still heard a lot of he's only got a couple moves, which I heard that my entire career, which it's fairly true. But they worked. So I heard a lot of people saying that I wouldn't pan out in college, and I put a lot of faith in a lot of different ways into Coach Santoro. He was rebuilding the Lehigh program, and his recruiting pitch to me, I'll never forget it, sitting in his office, was we want to rebuild this thing into a top 5 program, and we need high level guys to buy in, and he asked me to put trust in my trust and my faith in him, and I did. So being able to hug Coach Pat, again, I wasn't so much excited. Obviously there were some personal demons that were exercised and some people that I had a lot of fun proving wrong. But all the trust that Coach Pat put in me, to be one of the guys that helped lead the turnaround, along with Nate Brown and Mitch Minotti and the Cruzes and everything, to be able to pay him off for that in a way like that it meant a lot to me.
A bonus follow-up question, since I lost track of the number we were doing. You wrestled in in my opinion, one of the 3 best arenas in college wrestling. Outside of Grace Hall, what is your favorite arena in college to have wrestled in?
Dual meet or otherwise?
Dual meet.
Carver was fun, man.
That's a place unlike any other. Let's another side note here. This interview's never going to end because it's more of a conversation. What's it like to wrestle there when you've got your own iconic arena? You've got a place like no other with Grace Hall, and then you go into Carver for the first time. Just explain that.
So it was really interesting, and it was a unique situation because it was for the national duels. So we didn't wrestle Iowa that day. That was actually the year we beat Ohio State when they went on to win a national title. So one of the cool things, and this is why it was so much fun to experience Carver the way that we did. Going into it, it was really exciting because you see and you hear these things about Carver Hawkeye Arena, and we had actually wrestled there 2 years prior, but it was my redshirt year, so I didn't get to wrestle the dual meet. You see and you hear all these things about how crazy Carver is. And I mean, you watch one home dual meet of theirs and you can physically see how insane that fan base is. We went in, and that first round of the national duels, the way they had it set up that year was the quarters. So Iowa blows Chattanooga out. Cornell beats Minnesota pretty handily. And then the mat beside us, Missouri kind of buries Illinois. So us and Ohio State are down on the end, and we're in a back-and-forth dual meet, right? In a match that was, I think, a 5-5 split that was won because Nate Brown pinned Kenny Courts. So it gets to a point where the entire arena, and it's a full arena. It's not all Iowa people, but it's a full arena where the whole arena is watching our mat. And it was cool because we had all of Carver Hawkeye behind us. I'll never forget when Nate Brown pinned Courts, that place erupted. And then the dual meet comes down to overtime at heavyweight, and Doug Valero gets a reshot takedown to beat Tavanello. And that place they blew the roof off of it. It was awesome. So we actually got to have Carver behind us instead of, wrestling, people calling stalling and yelling at you and saying that their dad could beat up your dad. We got to have Carver Hawkeye behind us. So that was a really cool experience. That's definitely a hard one to beat. Although I will say this, Rec Hall, that's a tough place to wrestle.
I'm just thinking you've admitted your style. Iowa fans would have probably Rob, you would not have liked wrestling in front of them in Carver.
Dude, well, see, I didn't care. I got so used to it. The running joke was in our locker room that, and I openly said it. I was like, look, I get hit for stalling at least once walking onto the mat, so I really don't care. I knew people. Look, I know I wasn't exciting. And I really wish fans understood that. It was like, why can't everybody just go wide open and do what Jason Nolf does? Do people really not understand that if we could all do what Jason Nolf does or what David Taylor did, We would. It's not that easy. There's a reason that a guy like Jason Nolf has, 30 out of 35 matches in a season are bonus points. He's a freak. So it's not that simple. You got to wrestle to what your strengths are. And now I'm by no means am I comparing myself to Kyle Dake. He's a far better wrestler than I ever was. But I mean, look, Dake does what he's good at, right? He didn't score 1,000 points, but he played to his skill set. I did the same thing. I was gonna find 1,000 different ways to hit a left-handed single. I was gonna try my damnedest to tilt you, and if not, I was certainly gonna ride you, and I was gonna get myself out on bottom. It was what I was good at. So why on earth would I take myself away from what I was good at? What made me, what gave me success, just to make somebody sitting in the stands happy? Like, no, dumb. But it would have been interesting. I would have liked to have seen, put a clock on how long it took the Carver fans to just unanimously boo me.
I would have probably put the over-under at about 12 seconds.
Oh, it would have been fast.
Yeah, well, here in Minnesota, we got the guy that sits right behind me. When the opposing wrestler gets the takedown, it's immediately, what's he doing on top? And that usually is within 5 seconds of the takedown. But anyway, you can listen to Mason Beckman talk a lot about college wrestling with his partner in crime, Tristan Warner, at PAPowerWrestle.com as part of the college edition of the PA Power Wrestling podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Beck_Diggity. And last thing for you, quarter of an inch, Charlie, quarter of an inch. What's that mean to you?
Mighty Ducks, man. Charlie Conway. Incredible. That to this day might still be my favorite t-shirt, that Mighty Ducks shirt.
Yes, because Mason Beckman was wearing the Charlie Conway old school Mighty Ducks, not the NHL version, but the first movie version, which is based right here in Minneapolis, in St. Paul. And, Charlie Conway jersey. And I sit there and I just see quarter of an inch. And I understand you actually went to that diner that Charlie Conway's mom worked at in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty cool. That t-shirt that was bought for me as, I think, like a birthday or Christmas present by
when you were like 8, right?
No, it was an ex-girlfriend of mine. We both loved that movie, and we used to joke about it, and she went out and found a shirt like that. So, not many long-lasting positives out of that relationship, but I am never giving that shirt up.
So that's a hockey movie my wife will watch with me. She will not watch Slapshot with me anymore, okay? And,
come on, that's based in Johnstown.
I have a Charlestown Chiefs jersey.
That's where kid states are. By the way, the worst place to go coach for a weekend, Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
But Pat Pecora's been doing it for 40-something years.
God bless him.
Anyway, on that note, we won't make any more enemies within the Keystone State. Mason, always a pleasure, man. Now at this hour, we've gone way over in terms of our normal short time, which is normally, I still got to do the short time shots. Of course, by the time you're hearing this, I've already done the short time shots, but that's going to be a much shorter version. But happy Thanksgiving, everybody, except for you guys in Canada. You've already had your Thanksgiving. As you say it up there in Canada, it's Thursday. Any final words before we go, Mr. Beckman?
Nah, not really, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the heck out of it. Like you already mentioned, if you guys enjoy this, you enjoy listening to me ramble on aimlessly, go give the PA Power College podcast a listen, or just the PA Power podcast in general. Jeff Upson, Eric Knopf-Snyder, they do an awesome job. To bring this, I just got tweeted this. It's the reason I bring this up. To close this thing out about Reynolds High School, there'll be a AA school, which is a small school in Pennsylvania. The male enrollment of grades 9 through 11 at Reynolds High School is 131.
Yikes.
So that is that's the thing we're dealing with. So small school, small town, small school, big results. But thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate the heck out of it. Anytime you want me on, more than happy.
Sounds good, man. Always a pleasure. The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Clothing. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. First time listening? Well, you can change that by going to matttalkonline.com/get-short-time to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or listen on your favorite podcatcher at matttalkonline.com/listen.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to matttalkonline.com.